Okay, let's continue our study of the Madhyamaka Kalika. Let us now look at chapter 21, verse number 10 of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika. Svapava vipavas jaiva nayika iti upapadayate. Svapava vipavas jaiva nane iti upapadayate. Kumarajiva's version. Let's see. If arising and sensation were identical, this would not be possible. If arising and sensation were different, this too would not be possible. Okay, Professor Ye's version. Arising and sensation cannot be identical. Arising and sensation also cannot be different. Okay, please note that the terms used here correspond exactly to those in the verse of homage. Sampava means arising, and vipava means sensation. Eka means identity, and nana means difference. In other words, what chapter 21 discusses here is still neither identity nor difference, nor the verse of homage. From the verse of homage. So please note that as soon as you accept that there is arising and sensation, a question immediately follows. What exactly is the relationship between arising and sensation? If we are said to be identical, that cannot be established. If they are said to be identical, they cannot be established. If they are said to be different, that cannot be established either. Thus, the 27th chapter that follow in the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika continually unfolded the eighth negation of the verse of homage. In other words, once you accept that there is arising, you will inevitably fall into permanence and annihilationism, identity and difference, coming and going. This is the basic logic of the entire Mula Madhyamaka Kalika. Let us analyze it further. If a thing changes into something different, this kind of change generally takes two forms. The first is external change in space and time. For example, if there a person who is walking. Is there a person who is walking? Is there an arrow in flight? These are precisely the question discussed in chapter 2 of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika. So-called coming, going, and motion all belong to change in external space and time. The second is change in internal structure. What is change in internal structure? The most typical example is causal succession. That is to say, the preceding state ceases. The subsequent state arised and causal continuity is thereby formed. So please note, what is called difference ultimately unfolds into two kinds of questions. The first concerns macroscopic motion. That is, are there coming and going? Is there motion? The second concerns causal succession. That is there any new causal continuity? Does the entire chain of questions in the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika begins with the claim that there is arising? Once you accept that there is arising, the following will necessarily appear: permanency and annihilationism, identity and difference, coming and going, causal succession, microscopic motion. This entire set of questions will follow. What then is the approach of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika? It does not directly declare that there is no world. Instead, it traced the issue back step by step. First, can causal succession be established? If causal succession cannot be established, then change in internal structure cannot be established. Next, can microscopic motion be established? If motion also cannot be established, then change in external space and time cannot be established either. Therefore, change into something different cannot be established. As a whole, what then could remain? It would seem that only a permanent and invariant existence could remain. But the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika then goes on to demonstrate that the alleged existence of permanence and invariant all being cannot be established either. Therefore, one can fall neither into permanence nor into annihilationism. When we finally chase the argument back, we discover that the source of the problem lies in the original assumption that there is arising. In other words, the real error is the premise that there is arising. This is the basic approach of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika. What then does the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika ultimately compel you to accept? You must accept no arising. Now look back at what the very first verse of chapter 1 of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika begins by saying, not arising from itself, not arising from another, not arising from both, and not arising without a cause. Its core purpose is to refute arising. There is another very interesting point here. As we all know, Gumalajiva added a final sentence to his translation. Therefore, we know that there is none arising. Strictly speaking, however, this sentence does not appear in the original Sanskrit. In other words, the words no arising were added by Gumalajiva himself, but was this addition a good one? It was extremely good. This is because in the final analyst, the entire Mula Madhyamaka Kalika is about non-arising. Once you accept the non-arising, the entire logic of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika becomes very clear and coherent. If you continue to insist that there is arising many pages in the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika, simply become impossible to follow. Therefore, the rules of homage is by no means merely a ceremonial opening. It is the overarching framework of the entire Mula Madhyamaka Kalika. In the final analyst, the entire Mula Madhyamaka Kalika explains these 8 negations. And to explain the 8 negations is ultimately to explain non-arising. We can therefore summarize this further. What is the true core of the 8 negations? It is non-arising and non-sensation. To take this one step further, the core does not even consist of both non-arising and non-sensation. The core is simply non-arising. This is because only non-arising can lead to neither annihilationism nor permanence, neither identity nor difference, neither coming nor going. Once you accept that there is an arising, all these axioms will necessarily follow. Thus, all of the 8 negations are ultimately subsumed under non-arising. At a deeper level, this non-arising means there's no real conception of a cause and no real arising of an effect. The world will, as ordinary beings see, it is entirely a world in which effects arising. But what the Buddha truly wanted to tell us is none of the effects that ordinary beings see as arising has ever truly arisen. Thus, although the words of homage speaks of the 8 negations, it is actually speaking of dependent origination. And to speak of dependent origination is, in the final analyst, to speak of Pratitya Mutabhata. Pratitya Samudabhata dependent origination is non-arising. This is also why in our early guide to the Diamond Sutra, we repeatedly emphasized this for Chinese characters. 缘起无生, dependent origination is non-arising. If the entire words of homage were condensed into a single sentence, it would be this: The Buddha told the principle that the dependent origination is non-arising. It is precisely because this principle, dependent origination is non-arising, can bring all conceptual proliferation to an end and lead sentient being toward the liberation and nirvana. That Nagarjuna says the Buddha is supreme among all those who teach the Dharma, and therefore Nagarjuna now pay homage to him. What then did the Buddha teach that so deeply moved Nagarjuna and inspired such praise? In the final analysis, it comes down to these 4 Chinese characters. 缘起无生, dependent origination is non-arising. In Buddhism, the fact that nothing whatsoever has truly arisen is called emphasis, emptiness. Although the term emptiness does not appear extensively and explicitly in the earlier chapters of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika, and is not formally brought to the form until chapter 24, the true core of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika is always been non-arising, and non-arising is itself an expression of emptiness. Alright, okay, today we begin the second lecture of the Mula Madhyamaka Kalika. Let us first briefly review what we discussed in the previous lecture. In the previous lecture, we explained that if the title of the Sastra were translated strictly and directly from Sanskrit, it should actually be called root verse on middle way. We discussed this point last time. In Chinese Buddhism, however, we customarily abbreviate root verse on the middle way as 中论. Why? Because when Chinese Buddhism calls 中论, includes not only Nagarjuna's 450 verse, but also the Qingwu commentary in the other verse. What Chinese Buddhism generally calls 中论 is actually the complete work consisting of the root verse together with the commentary. As everyone already knows, the author of the Sastra is Nagarjuna. But today I would like to emphasize one more point. The name Nagarjuna has another Chinese rendering, 龙门. In Nagarjuna, Arjuna is on the one hand the name of a kind of tree. Kumarajiva therefore translated it as Su, meaning tree. On the other hand, Arjuna also carries connotations of valor and skilled in battle in Indian chapter and in Indian culture. For this reason, some people translated Nagarjuna as 龙门, meaning dragon valor. So when you encounter either 龙树 or 龙门 in the future, you must know that they refer to the same person. We generally continue to follow Gurumanajiva's translation and primarily use the name 龙树. We also discuss Nagarjuna's historical period last time. Broadly speaking, he lived during the period corresponding to the end of the Eastern Han dynasty and the beginning of the Three Kingdoms period of China. To make this easier to remember, you can simply think of it this way. Nagarjuna wrote the Mula Madhyamaka Karika at roughly the same time that Liu Bei made his 3 visits to the treasure cottage to invite Zhuge Liang to enter public service. This immediately gives everyone a sense of the historical period. There is another point to which everyone must pay particular attention. The Mula Madhyamaka Karika contains approximately 450 verses. Different versions may vary by 1 or 2 verses, but the total is around 450. In Indian, these verses did not originally function as a textbook. They serve as an outline for memorization. This point is especially important. That is to say, students first listen to their teacher explain the Dharma and came to understand the entire body of teachings. The teacher then condensed the core content into short verses so that the students could memorize and review it. The verses themselves are therefore only prompts. They are neither detailed lecture notes nor a complete textbook. Why do I repeatedly emphasize this point? Because if you simply take these 440 verses and try to read them on your own, it is perfectly normal not to understand them. It is not only Chinese readers who cannot understand them. Indian readers themselves cannot understand them either. This is because the verses were never designed to be read directly. They are intended to help you remember the teachings after you have understood them. Therefore, studying texts composed in verse requires 2 things. First, commentarized by Asian masters. Second, explanation by a teacher. Without these 2 forms of assistance, it is basically impossible to join a proper understanding by relying on the words alone. So you should not feel anxious if you cannot understand them. If you understand them as soon as you pick them up, that shows you are not ordinary person. Perhaps over many lifetimes and countless errands, you have already studied very shrewdly with Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. The vast majority of people must rely on commentary and explanations. This is because the words are extremely condensed and omit a great deal of content. Today, then, I would like to add something further about the commentaries on the Mula Mathematica Gallica. Last time, we explained that Chinese Buddhism relies primarily on Qingmu commentary. According to traditional account in Chinese Buddhism, Qingmu is approximately a third generation disciple of Nagarjuna and was also approximately the teacher of Gumarjiva's teacher. In Tibetan Buddhism, one of the oldest and most important commentaries on the Mula Mathematica Gallica is Fearless commentary. The identity of the author of the Fearless commentary has always been historically disputed. One view holds that Nagarjuna himself wrote the Fearless commentary. Most modern scholars, however, believe that it was probably not written personally by Nagarjuna. In any event, both the Qingmu commentary and the Fearless commentary are widely recognized as the earliest commentaries on the Mula Mathematica Gallica and those closest to Nagarjuna's time. Moreover, if you compare them, you find that the doctrinal meaning in the Qingmu commentary and the Fearless commentary is highly consistent in many places. This shows that they did indeed preserve an early tradition of a Mathematica understanding. In addition, several extremely important commentaries later appeared in Tibetan Buddhism. The Buddha Parita commentary, the Paviveka commentary, and the Chandalagriti commentary. Tibetan Buddhism later came generally to regard Chandalagriti's system as the most standard and complete system for interpreting Mathematica. Paviveka criticized Buddha Parita, while Chandalagriti defended Buddha Parita. As a result, Mathematica gradually came to be divided into Parasangika and Svatantrika schools. However, judging from our own experience of teaching these commentaries, the Buddha Parita commentary is the most absolute in its doctrinal meaning. I want to emphasize this point in particular. Of course, the Buddha Parita commentary is not without problems. In some places it is indeed rather verbose, and it sometimes makes simple questions complicate. But if we consider only the slowness of its understanding of the doctrinal meaning of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the Buddha Parita commentary is the most solid. Why then does Vimalakirti Hermitage put forward the one Buddha and 6 noble ones? Everyone should still remember the one Buddha is, of course, Sakyamuni Buddha. The 6 noble ones are Nagarjuna, Alayadeva, and Buddha Parita. Maitreya, Asanga, and Vasubantu. Of this, Nagarjuna, Alayadeva, and Buddha Parita represent the interpretation of the Buddha's second pillar of teaching, the Panagya Sutras and the Madhyamaka system. Maitreya, Asanga, and Vasubantu represent the interpretation of the third pillar of teaching, the Yogacara school and the consciousness-only system. Therefore, Nagarjuna, Alayadeva, and Buddha Parita, Maitreya, Asanga, and Vasubantu, these are the 6 noble ones upon whom Vimalakirti Hermitage primarily relies in its study of Mahayana Buddhism. According to traditional records, Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Asanga, and the other are generally regarded as bodhisattvas on the 10 stages. As for Buddha Parita, although explicit historical records are lacking, the depth of his doctrinal understanding fully qualifies him to be called a noble one. Why do we place a particular emphasis on one Buddha and 6 noble ones? Because their explanations of Buddha Dharma are extremely shrewd and rigorous. They do not make excessive concessions to the deluded views of ordinary beings. This point is especially important when many later Sastara masters, such as Paviveka, explain Buddha Dharma. They always seem to feel, should we not leave some room for ordinary beings? They therefore make many concessions to the understanding of ordinary beings. Vimalakirti Hermitage, however, emphasizes that our understanding of Buddha Dharma must pursue shrewdness, definitive meaning, and ultimate meaning. We do not prompt pursuit Dharma that appears correct, but is not. Therefore, in interpreting the second period of teaching, we place particular importance on Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, and Buddhaparita. In the previous lecture, we completed our discussion of the words of homage. Everyone must therefore understand the core of the words of homage is the aid mechanism. And what this aid mechanism teach is the principle of dependent origination. That is why I stated very clearly last time, the aid mechanism are dependent origination. Moreover, dependent origination does not mean that something arises. Quite the contrary, what dependent origination teaches is precisely non-arising, non-sensation, non-annihilationism, non-permanence. Therefore, dependent origination is non-arising. This is the true doctrinal meaning of dependent origination. This point is especially important. Everyone must therefore understand the entire Mula Madhyamaka Karika actually teaches only one thing. Dependent origination is non-arising, nothing else. Yeah, that's true, nothing else. Dependent origination is non-arising. Only this. As soon as you believe through dependent origination sometimes really arise, you will inevitably fall into self-contradiction. The core of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika is therefore non-arising. The words of homage has, in fact, already presented the entire framework of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Last time, I also explained that the principle of dependent origination expressed through the aid mechanism has two functions. First, bringing conceptual proliferation to an end. Second, tranquility. Bringing conceptual proliferation to an end means extinguishing the conceptual proliferation, attachments, and superimposition of ordinary beings. Tranquility leads to liberation, nirvana, and reality. Therefore, bringing conceptual proliferation to an end means eliminating superimposition. Tranquility means restoring deficiency. The horizontal doctrinal structure of Buddha Dharma is precisely eliminating superimposition and restoring deficiency. This is already expressed with great clarity in the words of homage at the very beginning of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Moreover, I repeatedly emphasized last time, between eliminating superimposition and restoring deficiency, which is the true main task. Clearly, it is eliminating superimposition. The reason is that the root of problem lies here. Ordinary beings mistakenly believe that things the Buddha considers fundamentally non-existent do exist. It is precisely because ordinary beings continually superimpose and claim that they can never see reality. We have, in fact, repeatedly discussed this point in the Guide to the Diamond Sutra and the Guide to the Langavatara Sutra. The Mula Madhyamaka Karika is precisely the Shastra that most shrewdly and incisively eliminates superimposition. Okay, that's all today.